Hey kids, Mr. Fly here, hope you're well, and welcome back to another edition of Bike News, the part of the channel where each month we take a look at what's been going on in the world of motorcycles here in the UK. So if you're interested in the Bike News for June 2020, stick around, stay tuned, let's talk motorcycles. Okay, so I've got 5 copies of the newspapers to go through, so this could be a long one, so grab yourself a drink or something, settle back, and let's have a chat about motorbikes. So the first paper then, the first story, this one is actually getting old now. This was back in May the 27th, so about a month old, or exactly a month old in fact, this one. And the first story I've picked out here, we've been expecting you. This is the new James Bond themed Triumph Scrambler 1200 from Triumph. Wonder what you thought of this. It looks absolutely lovely. About a month ago there was all sorts of stuff all over social media all about this bike, and I do love Scramblers generally, as you may know if you're a regular viewer of the channel, and this one looks beautiful. It's got the nice Triumph logo on it. It's got bits and pieces blacked out on it. In fact, if I go through some of the points, the main points here, it says, so Triumph unveiled the Scrambler 1200 Bond Edition. It's a limited edition run of the Scrambler 1200 XE, that's the expensive version anyway. It's got a funky TFT dash with a Bond startup screen. It's got a darker than dark finish. Pretty much everything is blacked out, including the mud guards, fork, swing arm, sump guard and grab rail. And it's also got some gold highlighted accents. It's loaded with special accessories, including fog lights with unique black shrouds, a stainless headlight grille, machined front brake reservoir, all Triumphs should have that anyway, Arrow exhaust end cans with carbon end caps, and various 007 touches. The seats got logo embroidered on the rear, and apparently the company is making 250 of them across the world. So yeah, so no doubt, lovely looking bike. But my question to you is, would you have one? Number one, I just find this is a little bit, isn't it a bit childish? I mean, maybe I'm just an old, I don't know, stick in the mud, but who wants something with 007 written all over it? We're not children. But anyway, maybe you are a massive 007 fan, that's fine. I assume you do like all things James Bond. I'm not anti-Bond by any means. So that's the first thing. And then the other thing, and this is the big thing, is this costs £6,000 more, well in fact 6,200 more than the XE. So if you want to buy one of these, 18,500, whereas the standard XE would cost you 12,300, is a bit of blacked out and a few 007 trinkets worth £6,000. I would say no, but I'll be very interested to hear your view below. As I say, they're only making 250 of these. I assume because they're a special, they might be making these at Hinckley. Maybe that's why they're so expensive. I don't know, but and 250 is not a lot worldwide, so no doubt they'll sell them if they're not already sold. As I say, this paper's nearly a month old now, but yeah, I don't know, lovely bike, but definitely not worth £6,000 extra in my view. Interested to hear what you think in the comments below. All right, next story then, one that piques my interest. Here we go. So this is a good news story about Norton for a change. We've heard lots about Norton, haven't we, since since they went under and then got rebought by TVS, I think it was, wasn't it, in India. Well, the good news is they're now hiring, and it says here that there are 9 jobs up for grabs. So not going to change the world, but there are 9 jobs going, ranging from IT to engine development. So if you fancy a job at the new Norton, they are now recruiting. Which, I mean, just generally, okay, 9 jobs ain't going to make a lot of difference, but I mean, the fact that they're hiring at all means that obviously Norton is going to be a going concern. So more on Norton a bit later in one of the later papers, but I think that's just great news that they seem to be getting back on their feet. Let's fingers crossed for Norton, because I mean, the amount of goodwill that there is for that company is incredible, isn't it? It's just, I know, in the past I've had all sorts of trials and tribulations, but really people love Norton and the brand in particular, and just, I think, want them to be successful. So fingers crossed for that. Next thing on this page that I just picked up here, Enfield issue a brake recall. This is one that's close to my heart because it's Royal Enfield. You may know I have a Royal Enfield Interceptor 650. I love that bike. Well, turns out Royal Enfield have issued a recall for the Interceptor 650, the Continental GT 650 and the Himalayan. It's to fix a potential problem with corroding Vibre brake calipers. Vibre being the sort of low end, cheaper end, if you like, Brembo brakes that are fitted to the Royal Enfields. If your bike is affected, Enfield will be in touch for inspection, and the calipers will be replaced as a preventative measure before the end of 2020, it says here. I just wondered, again, maybe you let me know in the comments if you're an Enfield owner, whether you've been contacted about this, because as I say, I've had mine for a while. I've certainly not been contacted by Enfield or anyone else about this potential recall. I don't know if my bike's affected or not. It's not clear whether they're all affected. But I'll be very interested to hear if you know, or if your bike has been affected, and whether you've been contacted about that, because obviously it's something we all need to get on top of. You don't want your brakes potentially corroding under your gear. All right, next up. Harley go for gold with the FXDR. Now this is another special edition bike, and I've sort of infamously, and much to my chagrin, have never ridden a Harley Davidson. I will put that right at some point, for sure, because I love the idea of Harley Davidsons. I've just not had the chance to ride one yet. But this is the FXDR in a special paint scheme that's just apparently for the UK and Ireland. So let me read a bit what it says here. Harley Davidson have revealed a limited edition custom FXDR that will only be sold in the UK and Ireland. Gone is the plain white in favour of white, black and gold across the tank, tail unit, headlight and front mudguards. That's what I love about it. I love a black and gold bike. And with a bit of white as well, it really does work. It's a lovely combo, this paint scheme. It comes with a proper Harley warranty. So unlike if you did a fancy paint job of your own, which wouldn't be covered by the warranty, this one is. And Harley are asking 350 quid more than the standard model, which I think is pretty good actually. 350 quid for a pucker paint job, that's a bargain. I think that's good. I haven't said that, the bike is 18,345, so it is an expensive bike anyway, but I think it looks absolutely awesome. As I say, never ridden one, maybe I'll get the chance to at some point, but wow, it looks good. What else does it say here? Oh yeah, it says here it's a damn sight cheaper than doing the paint job yourself, which I agree. The standard FXDR has come down nearly £2,000 from the 20,200 they wanted when the bike was launched. So actually, it's a bit cheaper now than it was. But what do you think of that? I think it looks absolutely stunning. I love the airbox poking out the side on here. I don't know if it's like the Rocket, and that it only looks good from that side. Maybe it is, but I certainly love that paint scheme. Anything with a bit of black and gold wins for me. Maybe it would have been even better with some gold wheels. I don't know, but yeah, love that. What do you think to the new gold FXDR? Beautiful looking machine, I reckon. Right, next up. A letter here from the letters page, and this is in the interest of balance, because last month in Bike News I talked about some hotels that I said were maybe being a bit unscrupulous in the Isle of Man, where people had booked up to go to the Isle of Man TT and weren't even being able to get replies from hotels that they booked up for, spent money in advance, given the Isle of Man TT isn't happening because of the whole C word thing. Basically I had a bit of a slagging off of some of the Isle of Man hotels, which you know, not all hotels are bad on the Isle of Man, because it turns out here this person, Keith Jones, has written in and said, I did a bit of research among friends who are TT regulars, and all said their accommodation had offered the option of a refund or to transfer the booking to the 2021 TT. So thumbs up to those hotels that did that. That's the right thing to do. So excellent news that not all hotels should be tarred with the same brush on the Isle of Man. So that was thank you to Keith Jones for writing in and putting us straight on that one. Okay, last story in this first paper then. One of these MCN 250 bike tests. I love these because they usually pit two similar sort of bikes together so you can get a good comparison. This time they put the Ninja 1000SX Touring, the new Kawasaki, against the Suzuki GSX-S1000F. This review is of interest of me, not because I've ridden either of these bikes, in fact I haven't ridden either of them, I'd like to ride both though, but because these are proper old school touring machines, sort of a genre that has been a little bit forgotten maybe in the last 10 years. So these are bikes I would like to ride, and they're also excellent value. So obviously expensive, all new bikes are expensive, but compared to some, the Kawasaki £12,347, the Suzuki a bargain £10,347. I think it sounds like a bargain anyway for this sort of bike. You know, if we go to the verdict, what do MCN say? And Mike Armitage, their deputy editor of motorcycling, wrote this piece. He said the Kawasaki's new Ninja 1000SX is a proper sports tourer. You can use it for anything from tedious commuting to occasional track day two-up touring, holidaying to lazy weekend poodle. After a do-it-all bike, but don't go near dirt, it's all the machine you'll ever need. So the Kawasaki wins for them. On their star rating, they give them the Quack 5 stars out of 5 and the Suzuki 4 out of 5. I think their main complaint about the Suzuki was it started to look a little bit dated, and they didn't like the looks of it so much either, and some various other bits and pieces like the dash doesn't look quite so up to date, stuff like that. I actually personally, for some reason, I quite like the looks of the Suzuki. I think it looks better than the Kawasaki. It's got a bit of, it's sort of got some curves about it, which sometimes I don't like. For example, on the Hayabusa, I didn't like the way that was all curvy and clamshell. But on the GSX-S1000F, it looks good. It reminds me of the Bat bike. I like it. So anyway, I'd like to have a go at that, and indeed the new Ninja 1000SX at some point. Unfortunately, it's quite hard for me to ride Kawasaki, so it's going to be, and Kawasaki themselves don't talk to me for some reason. Suzuki are very good to me, so I dare say I could probably get a ride on that at some point. So stay tuned to the channel, hopefully for me riding and doing more of an in-depth review on one or other of those bikes in the future. All right, there we go. That was it for the first paper. Swiftly moving on to the next paper then. First story in here, if he can control his hands. Here we are, back in black, Bullit Hero. have given their fun, learn illegal hero machines a makeover for 2020. And I was talking about that Harley in black and gold. They've now come out with their Bullit in black and gold. I think it looks absolutely cracking. They have, this is the bike that they call the Bullit Hero, by the way. There's a 125 and a 50cc version. This has got the gold wheels. There's only a tiny picture here. Hopefully you can see that okay. But I think it looks absolutely cracking. I have been talking to these in the past, and I think I might have a bike scheduled in, or it might have been during the pandemic thing, and it might have got cancelled, so maybe I need to rearrange it. I'll check that out, but hopefully I'll get to ride one of these. I'm a fan of smaller capacity motorcycles. The 125cc machine here that looks absolutely mint in black and gold comes in at £2,599. If it rides half decent, that is just as a fun thing. Or indeed, if you're, I don't know, live in a town or you're a student or something and need cheap transport, what an absolute winner. Love to have a crack on one of those, particularly in the black and gold. So we'll see what happens on that one. And then also on this page, bad news from Triumph. Triumph plan for hundreds of job losses across the world is the story here. It says it's an attempt to shore up the business in the wake of coronavirus. The company is expected to make 400 redundancies in total, with 240 of those coming from within the UK. Triumph is saying that demand for 500cc machines has plummeted by between 40 and 65% during the last few months during the coronavirus pandemic. And they said, we don't believe the big bike market around the world will recover to the level it was pre-COVID-19. So this is a real blow again for Triumph. This is already after they said that we're going to make those other 50 redundancies when they announced that they were moving the bulk of the production of Triumph motorcycles over to their Thailand factories. So double whammy for the guys and girls that work up at Triumph in Hinckley and elsewhere. So yes, it's a shame, isn't it? But I mean, motorcycling, like all industries, massively affected during this current pandemic. But yeah, more bad news there for Triumph. What a shame. And I'm surprised when they said we don't expect the big bike market around the world to recover to pre-COVID-19 levels. I'm surprised by that, and I hope they're wrong. I wonder why they think that. Odd. Okay, to the letters page. Now this is a letter from Stephen Lee. Headline, forget the tech and just have fun. I completely agree with what Stephen's saying here. So he said, it struck me how ludicrous the bike scene is getting these days. 17,000 for a new bike. In fact, often more expensive if you're going to the real top end stuff, as we'll come to later. A bike is for riding, not washing a cinema grade dash or connecting my phone to. Here. Let's get back to enjoying bikes for the freedom of the ride and without the worry of mortgage amounts of money needed to buy them. And so that's from Stephen Lee. I couldn't agree more, Stephen. There's no doubt these new fancy expensive bikes are nice, but they're out of the reach of most people, aren't they? I mean, I'm lucky enough to be, I'm not poor and I can't afford to be spending 20 grand on a motorcycle. It's ridiculous. So yeah, and I've ridden a few second-hand bikes recently and some older bikes, and they offer great fun as well. You don't have to have the latest and greatest new machine to have great fun on a motorcycle. Scour the second-hand ads, buy a smaller capacity machine and get something for reasonable money. You'll have 99% of the fun without having to shell out, like Stephen says, mortgage amounts of money. It's crazy. I blame PCP for this. I won't get on my high horse about PCP because I know it works for a lot of you, but I just think it's making, that is having the effect of pushing new bike prices up, because people think that they can afford them because of lowish monthly payments, and then if you're like me, old school, and you want to buy a bike outright, they're starting to become ridiculously unattainable. So I agree with Stephen 100%. Let's see some back to basics sort of bikes. If manufacturers cut the costs and just gave us bikes with ABS, maybe a bit of traction control, proper dashboard, old school dials, even on doesn't necessarily have to be a retro bike, that would work for me. Again, maybe I'm just a Luddite and a dinosaur. I'll be really interested to hear your views on that one in the comments below as well. For me, bikes, I just get a bit too techy, a bit too PlayStation generation. Maybe it's because I'm an old guy, and of course, motorcycle manufacturers need to get new riders in, but I ain't sure that's the way to do it. At the end of the day, it's the way a bike makes you feel. It's the basic stuff about whether it's comfortable, whether it sounds good, whether it rides nice, is what makes you enjoy riding a bike, not how good the TFT is or whether the thing looks like a transformer. Anyway, I did get on my high horse there a bit, didn't I? Sorry about that. Right, moving on. Next one, another one of these MCM 250 tests. This one particularly close to my heart. Title here, Sibling Rivalry. They've pitted here the Triumph Street Triple RS against the Triumph Speed Twin and the Triumph Speed Triple. So 3 naked Triumph motorcycles here, and it's of particular interest to me because I own a Street Triple and I own a Speed Twin. I don't have a new Street Triple, I have an oldish one, but I love it. And of course, all Speed Twins are new because they only came out last year, so mine is a new one too. And up against the Speed Triple, which I have ridden a number of times but never actually owned one. Let's see what their verdict was on these. This again is from Mike Armitage of MCN. He says, so he talks about all the bikes and then he says, the bike that's most enjoyable, usable and inspiring out of these three is the Speed Twin. The 1200's easy access thrust, immediate response, vivid sensations, it harks back to what I was just saying, quick fix thrills make it the best pure road bike. It's the easiest to live with, has the greatest practicality and the most character too. It's a proper bike. At least that's Mike Armitage's view. And I have to say, I don't take issue with this, having ridden all three bikes extensively, and as I say, own two of them. My Speed Twin is one of the bikes at the moment, that and my Enfield. When I open the garage, they're the bikes that I usually want to ride. They're just great, great fun. They put a grin on your face. The Speed Twin, I think, has got exactly the right amount of tech on board, in that it does have ABS and traction control. It does have riding modes that you could probably live without, but that is about it on it. And hence you don't pay way over the odds for stuff that you don't really want, need or use, I would argue. It does go very well. It's very much a modern bike. It looks beautiful. I think it's great. And I think, surprisingly, I think for MCN making it a winner, because they've always been massive Street Triple fans, I'm surprised they put that ahead of the Street Triple. And now the new Speed Triple, or newish, the latest iteration, I think of the Speed Triple is as good as the Street Triple in terms of its weight, its agility and so on. So I was surprised they came out with the Speed Twin as the winner of that, but I don't necessarily disagree, I have to say. Okay, last story in this paper, still with me, is Simon Warburton. Now this is the guy that heads up, he's ex-Triumph and he heads up Royal Enfield's sort of design operation. He got in there early on before Enfield came out with the 650 twins. What he said, it's a great article, and maybe buy the back issue of the paper to read the whole thing. So it says here, as a design engineer, then product manager at Triumph, Simon Warburton was a driving force behind some of Hinckley's greatest bikes. Today he's head of product development at Royal Enfield. He's fundamental to the firm's brand new multi-million-pound development centre at Bruntingthorpe and its first big product, the twin-cylinder 650, which was designed on his watch. He says, at Royal Enfield we really want to be the top player in the 250 to 750cc market globally, and we're getting there. Well, they've certainly made a good start, haven't they? We've produced some really nice bikes and there's more to come, he says. Well, I can't wait to see what more there is to come from Simon Warburton and the team. Not only does he make great motorcycles, but he makes great crumpets as well. I do love a crumpet. So thank you, Simon Warburton, for your efforts. Alrighty, next paper coming right on up. Here we go, 4 stories from this one. First one, I know I'm going to get people saying, why do you speak so fast? Sorry about that. If you're not a native English speaker, I apologise that I speak so quickly. I get a little bit excited when I go through the news. Okay, first story here from the third paper. NEC show is a no-go. Again, if you remember from last month's bike news, I talked about the Milan show being cancelled, and I think the Cologne one as well. NEC, is it Cologne? I think so. The NEC show now, Motorcycle Live, which is kind of a staple sort of signpost, if you like, in the biking calendar for many of us, particularly me. I've been to the NEC show. I always have kind of mixed feedback about the show, but I still like the fact that, you know, in November, you know you're going to go and see all the new bikes. Well, sadly, in 2020, you ain't going to be doing that at the NEC. So this year's Motorcycle Live has been called off due to the coronavirus pandemic. The show has been at the NEC since 1981 and last year attracted more than 104,000 visitors. Due to social distancing requirements, restricting attendance numbers and dictating the direction of people around the hall, this would all ultimately have impacted negatively on the experience of those attending. And I do agree, by the nature of these events, you kind of meander your way around. They're always very crowded. It's not the place to be, you know, or the sort of thing to set up if you've got a pandemic going on. I entirely understand why the organisation has done this, but it is a bit of a shame. But let's hope, fingers crossed, in 2021 we'll maybe then back to some sort of normality and it can come back bigger and stronger. And I look forward to meeting a bunch of you at the NEC then, but sadly not going to happen this year, which is a real shame. But I guess inevitable, really, once those other shows had announced the same thing. Right, next story here. This is fascinating, interesting. McFly Tech goes back to the future. Loving the headline, MCN guys. So this bike here is a tech company in Italy, and it's created a brand new piece of software that enables electric bikes to closely mirror the speed, vibration, and even the sound of a conventional motorbike. Basically, it can ape everything from a 250cc two-stroke screamer right through to a 1200cc V-twin. What they do, it's called the Emula, and what they do, it's basically, they, as I say, changes the parameters so the bike can feel like any bike you care for it to feel like. It has speakers in the headstock to imitate induction roar. Oh, listen to that. Don't know if you heard that. An aeroplane just went over. Sounded a bit like a Merlin engine. Normally I'll be running out to have a listen. Anyway, the Emula has speakers in the headstock to imitate induction roar and valve train noise. Speakers at the rear produce the exhaust note. I'm loving all this. And it's got bass shakers in the bowels of the bike to give it some extra rumble. So I think this is hilarious, the fact that they've done this. A lot of people, one of the complaints they make about electric bikes is they don't have any noise. So this has addressed that. You can add the noise of whatever bike you want and indeed the feel of that. What do you make of this? Is this just a ridiculous gimmick, or is this something that electric bikes should have? I'm not sure where I stand. I quite like the idea. I'd like to have a go and see how realistic it is. It does feel a little bit gimmicky though, doesn't it? But it might really enhance the thing. I wonder how loud it is. Certainly people would hear you coming, so that would be good. And it would be wild, wouldn't it, to just at the you know, flick of a button decide today I'm going to ride, you know, a Panigale, and then the next day you're going to ride a, you know, a Kawasaki two-stroke smoker. Brilliant. Anyway, interested to hear again in the comments below your views on that one. Right, what's the next story in here? A while ago since I did this, so I can't quite remember. Better than new. So here we go. Two-stroke specials, just having mentioned a two-stroke. So this is a Yamaha RD500LC Special. 83.4 brake horsepower, 50-degree V4. Bet it sounds absolutely stonking. When it was first revealed to the world in 1983, Yamaha's RD500LC was the raciest race replica ever built. Sports bikes was still a new concept at that stage. It looks absolutely cracking, doesn't it? I mean, it looks like great fun. Lovely looking bike. I mentioned earlier that I'd ridden some second-hand and older bikes. Bikes of this era are really starting to appeal to me again because it's that back to basics raw feeling of motorcycling, and you just get, you know, pure motorcycling thrills. And this being a two-stroke as well would give you that snappy power band thrill that two strokes give you, and it looks an absolute stormer as well. So I can't remember much about this story other than somebody's built this. It's not something that I don't think it's something that you can go and buy. I think it's just something that somebody's made. Let's have a look here. The verdict is it delivers so much more than the original. Yeah, it's just a one-off. Sorry, I should have reread this article before I did the review, so I can't tell you much more about it, but it does look good. All right, last story in this paper then. Is it better than a big capacity sports bike? Now this is that question that always comes up, isn't it? And in this case, referring to the Ducati Panigale V2, another bike that is very close to my heart because I have an 899 Panigale, what was known as the baby Panigale when it came out. Of course, the 959 replaced that when it gave some horrible exhaust pipes, and now the V-Twin, as they now call it, replaces the 959. It's actually 955cc now, and looks the same as the big Panigales. Now, as I mentioned before, Martin Eves is my favourite MCN reviewer. What has he said about it? Well, first off, he says here, the new 14,995 Panigale V2, so still an expensive bike for a, in quotes, small sports bike. It not only now looks as sensational as its V4 sister. Now, I would just take issue with that because I think the original bikes look better. Have you seen the Superleggera? How bloated and weird that front end looks on that version of the Panigale. Give me the original Panigales any day, but I digress. So it looks as sensational as V4 sister. It's actually more engaging and flattering, making more sense than a tyre shredding, brain and body battering superbike. I 100% agree with Michael here. That is why I bought the 899, not the 1199 that was out at the time when I bought mine back in 2015. So yeah, I think it 100% would make a better road bike. And again, I'm hoping I'm going to get to ride this, and I think I've got it in the diary with Ducati UK going to lend me one of these at the back end of the year, so there will be much more coming on this bike on the channel, and it's going to be fascinating to compare the current V2 with my original, I say original, 899, just to see how they've evolved in the last 5 years. In terms of his summary, he says the very fact it doesn't have 200 brake horsepower is its biggest strength, makes it more rewarding to ride than a superbike. I would argue this is still a superbike, but I know what he means. If Ducati decide to go ahead with a Streetfighter version, we're in for another treat too. Now, wouldn't that be amazing? The reason why we were talking about the Street and Speed Triple earlier, the Triumphs, the reason I bought the Street Triple was I thought it would make more sense on the road than the Speed Triple. You've got power that you can use all of it instead of always going at license losing speeds. Same applies with the Panigale and why I bought the 899. You imagine a Streetfighter version of the V2. Wouldn't that be awesome? That bike, the current Streetfighter, the V4 Streetfighter, is starting to grow on me. I initially said I didn't like the looks of it, but the more I see it, the more it's growing on me, and I just love the idea of sitting upright, or more upright, on a bike that's got the performance of the Panigale. I rode my 899 the other day, actually. We've had some wonderful weather, and I thought it's time I gave that bike a spin. Didn't film it or anything, just went for a good hour's blast. thoroughly enjoyed it, reminded me how great a bike it is, but my goodness me, did I ache when I got home. My joints have forgotten what it's like to be on a sports bike because I don't ride it enough. And a Street Fighter version of one of these, that might be enough to make me chop in my Panigale and maybe get one of those, I don't know. But yeah, please, Ducati, if you're watching, do make a Street Fighter version of the V2. I think that would absolutely fly off the shelves. All right, there we go. That's it for paper number 3. Right, next paper. Have cops got COVID-19 regs all wrong? This is an interesting story. This is to do with a... this is a guy called, who is it? Steve Ireland. He owns an events company in Staffordshire called WOR Events. Basically an off-road enduro type thing. Let me read some of the highlights that I've pulled out here. So guidance surrounding outdoor events in a COVID-19 world is proving difficult to understand for police and organisers in England. Short-circuit track days have been running with the government's blessing since the end of May, but some motocross and enduro facilities are having their events kiboshed by the police, who say the activity is illegal. So Steve Ireland, this guy here who owns this WR Events, he was forced to cancel the second day of an enduro practice weekend despite spending more than £2,000 of his own money on social distancing signage and PPE. There were no spectators allowed, and vehicles had to park 4 metres apart. All attendees paid in advance, so there was no cash on the day. And he had 25 members of staff enforcing social distancing. Yet he still got closed down by the police. Just seems nuts, doesn't it? It says here, so you can play golf or tennis, but you can't ride your bike off road, which just doesn't seem right, does it? When you think of the nature of doing off road riding, you're on your own doing it. You got a helmet on. Why wouldn't that be allowed? Yet you can play golf and tennis. Just doesn't make sense. These things are evolving all the time. In a minute, we've got another story about the whole COVID-19 thing. It's hard to navigate your way through, isn't it? Things are changing day by day, but clearly in this case it seems like they've got things wrong. So I do feel sorry for poor old Steve here. He's he reckons he's 10 grand down on the whole event. So that's a real shocker. All right, next up, return of the Hondamatic. This is interesting. MCN keep their eyes, as I guess lots of magazines do, on the patents records that are coming out. And Honda have recently put in a new patent for this bike. So again, let me read you out the highlights here. So back in 1976, Honda made a CB750A Hondamatic. It was a twist and go version of its range-topping superbike of the era. I don't think it did particularly well, actually. Well, anyway, a new design for a similar type of bike has come out. It has a foot-operated gear shift, but no clutch lever. An array of inputs, including sensors for speed, revs, gear position and throttle position, are allied to a sensor that monitors pressure on the gear lever. Using this information, the ECU can cut the ignition during upshifts, split the throttle on downshifts, and modulate the clutch when starting and stopping, so the bike doesn't stall, obviously. Basically the same as a modern up and down quick shifter, but with an automated clutch. The automated design defaults to a disengaged position if there's a loss of hydraulic pressure or an electronic failure, so that drive is disconnected, so you can't stall it, in other words. So really interesting to see what you think of this. Of course, Honda do have their DCT version, which is the dual clutch throttle, dual clutch, can't remember what it stands for now, but you know what I'm talking about, design, which is basically an automatic gearbox. So it's interesting that they're trying out this different version of a twist and go bike. I wonder how successful it'll be. I know the DCTs, for example, in the Africa Twin, which I recently rode, you may have seen my reviews on that, I'll stick a link in the corner somewhere to those. That DCT version has been the bigger seller than the manual version. So maybe Honda are thinking we should do this for some more of our bikes, and perhaps this is a simpler version to implement, I don't know, but we'll keep our eye out for new bikes from Honda with twist and go controls soon. Right, a couple of letters I've pulled out here from the letters page just because I like the sound of them. First one from Ian Robb, entitled Keep Your Lid On. It was only a short time ago that you went to a filling station to get your fuel and were asked to remove your helmet for security reasons. Now anyone can walk in with a mask on and no one even mentions it. So yeah, good point, Ian, so like that. Next one, Speed Twin to Triumph. This is from somebody called Rich Pedworth. What a joy for me to read the test by Mike Armitage where he rated the Triumph Speed Twin as the winner. This is the thing we were just looking at, the comparison test. Yes, a basic motorcycle with no unnecessary gadgets and a simple rain, road and sport modes. A joy to ride on A and B roads while adhering to varying speed limits. I could not agree with you more, Rich. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier on when I was talking about, you know, let's get back to basic joy of motorcycles. I think the Speed Twin absolutely ticks that particular... ticks that bottle. That doesn't make sense, but you know what I mean. All right, next up, Attack of the Super Nakeds. Again, my favourite of the MCN tests. Here, they pitted 3 bikes, none of which I've ridden, but I will be riding 2 of them soonish. The Kawasaki Z H2, the Streetfighter V4 S from Ducati, which we mentioned a lot in this review, and the new 1290 Super Duke R. So the new Super Duke R, I love the old Super Duke R. I've ridden it quite a bit. I had the old one a couple of years back for a few weeks from Ducati. Loved it. I'm not always very complimentary about Ducatis. I just think they look odd, but the Super Duke R I think is one that does look really good. It looks mean. The old one rode brilliantly. The new Super Duke R I'm sure rides brilliantly too. And of course the Streetfighter V4 S we've seen lots of in the press recently. Currently the journos are all over it. Once the proper journalists have done with both these bikes, I'll get a chance to ride them once all the initial fuss has died down, and I'll keep bringing you some sort of real world reviews of these bikes, and I cannot wait to ride them. However, one bike I haven't got in my diary to ride is the Kawasaki Z H2, purely because I think it is an absolute munter. I mean, this is one fugly looking bike. I've mentioned it before. To me, it just looks like a bloated hamster. It does absolutely nothing for me. It's quite a heavy bike as well, apparently. I don't want really to go anywhere near that one. I know my mate Lamb Chops has been riding it and he liked it, but he loves anything with a supercharger or is just a tart for a bit of speed. But that bike for me just doesn't do it. It's not in the same league as the others. Let's see what MCN's verdict was. See if they agree with me. Michael Neves, again, my favourite road tester, he says the KTM ticks every single box. KTM's new 1290 Super Duke R has a new level of refinement and easy speed that makes it the most rewarding, exciting to ride at any speed. That's out of these 3. The Streetfighter V4 S is impressive in every area, from finished design, speed, handling, technology, but it's such a serious piece of kit, only the most hardened and well-heeled of sports riders need apply. So the KTM wins as far as he's concerned. So that's interesting. I thought he was going to put the Ducati first, but he prefers the KTM. I rode the, thinking of that V4, I rode the Panigale V4 a while back, and I found it an absolute pussycat to ride. But that's because I'm comparing it with my 899, which was, you know, typical Ducati, quite a difficult bike to ride, you know, day to day on the road. Well, I think with the new V4s, Ducati have come on leaps and bounds. The bikes are just easy to ride now and flashy riding. But even compared to that, Nevesy reckons the Super Duke R is an easier road bike to ride. So can't wait to get my hands on that to see if I agree. So that's interesting. Okay, and then last up for this paper, another Enfield Interceptor story. So I often get criticised because I'm always going on about Enfields and Triumphs and BMWs and Ducatis, but they're all bikes that interest me. That's why I talk about them a lot. Anyway, this was an interesting article. And well worth getting the back copy because it's an interesting read about the sort of backstory of how they came up with the Interceptor 650. It says here though, one bit I've highlighted, surprisingly the Interceptor 650 was the UK's 3rd best-selling motorcycle in 2019, only pipped to the post by the BMW GS and the GS Adventure, which is hardly anything to be ashamed of. So I don't think it is surprising, because when you ride one of these bikes, it just puts a grin on your face. No, they're not very fast. No, they're not as well built as a Triumph, but for the money you pay, just over £5 for a 650 twin, these things are just excellent value and great motorcycles. I absolutely love mine. So again, if you're interested in the Enfield Interceptor, get yourself a back copy of MCN and read that article all about them. Great stuff. All right, last paper for this month's review. So, first story, here we go from the final paper. Brakes left on bike training. Sorry, this is another COVID-19 story. And this is this week's paper, but I have a feeling this story may already be out of date, because it says here that motorcycle training schools up and down the country are furious with the DVSA, who are remaining steadfast in the refusal to allow motorcycle training to resume. Government are currently recommending people to avoid public transport, of course, so, you know, they should be encouraging people to ride motorcycles is the sense of this article. But I find this really weird that motorcycle training schools can't get back to training. I find this odd because on the 4th of July it's been confirmed, me as a hobby pilot as well, hence the Missenden Flyer, I know that flying training is allowed to commence from the 4th of July, and when you learn to fly an aeroplane, you're sitting in an enclosed cockpit, usually very close proximity to your instructor. That's allowed to happen from the 4th of July, but apparently motorcycle training isn't. Which is why I wonder if this is just a little bit out of date already. It may be, of course. This item may have been written a couple of weeks ago now, so maybe that's incorrect. But yeah, it seems wrong that if that is true, that motorcycle training can't resume, given other things can. Interesting. Right, next up, I said there'd be another story about Norton in this review, and at last, again, a great story. This is the new interim CEO of Norton. Let me read what it says here. So Norton have big plans for the future, as well as a return of racing, according to the new interim CEO. TVS have employed John Russell, this chap here, to help lay the foundations for future success. He says he was absolutely delighted to take on the Norton role. He hasn't had this much fun in a long time. He says that they've begun to look at improvements to the production process and ownership experience, as well as bringing the latest 650 twin range to market alongside the existing models. The first aim of any company, he says, is to try and deliver its customer orders, of course. We being TVS, didn't buy Norton as an ongoing concern, so there's no legal liability for them. But obviously, if we can find a way of doing that, you know, delivering those back orders, then they're going to do so. So they are trying to do the right thing, says John, the new CAO, which is great news. And again, wish him absolutely the best success in making a go of Norton, because let's face it, they do make beautiful motorcycles. If only they can get them produced on time, if only they can get their customer service sorted. And they stand a good chance with John Russell at the helm. He used to, I think, run Harley Davidson or something. Anyway, he knows what he's doing. He's not sort of a new man that's popped up and suddenly is running Norton. He knows his stuff. He's a motorcycling man. And again, fingers crossed that Norton will be back on the up and up soon. And let's this time, please, let's make Norton. Let's make it work. Please, John, have a good go of it. Right, Bullit with your name on it. New 250 could be perfect for bobbing around town. What do you make of this? It's a new bobber from Bullit. It's a new 250cc V-twin. That's the bit that appeals to me. Aptly named the V-Bob 250. I'm not really a big fan of bobbers, and I don't think this one looks very good either, to be fair. Which is a shame, because Bullit normally produce, you know, relatively cheap or very cheap motorcycles, and they usually look superb. This one doesn't quite work for me on the looks front, but I do like the idea that it's got a 250 V-twin. The V-Bob 250 weighs in at just 179 kilograms fully fueled, so really lightweight bike. Puts out just shy of 17 brake horsepower, so not going to be powerful, but then it is only a 250. But it has a final belt drive, which I really like the idea of. So yeah, it would be interesting to ride this. And a V-twin out of a 250, that would be just brilliant. You can get one of these, by the way, £3,799. So no doubt it's great value. Even though, as I say, I'm not particularly a bobber fan and I don't like the looks of this very much, I would be interested in riding this. Just that V-twin intrigues me, and also what that riding position would be like on a smaller bike. I expect, you know, physically it's probably quite a small bike, but yeah, fascinating that. What do you make of that? All right, last story then for this this month's bike news. The small way round. We end on some small capacity machines. Bikes that I love. So this is the KTM 390 Adventure. Haven't ridden it yet. It is in the diary. I will be bringing you reviews on the 390 Adventure. And the Royal Enfield Himalayan, as it's properly pronounced. £4,399 for the Himalayan, £5,499 for the KTM. Both bikes that are built in India, of course. The KTM about £1,000 more expensive, so significantly more. And you'd think, just looking at them, I mean, they look like chalk and cheese, don't they? The KTM looks razor sharp, brand new, super modern. The Himalayan, let's face it, looks like a bit of a pig, doesn't it? But I have ridden the Himalayan, and it doesn't ride too bad, it has to be said. It feels quite sizable, and it's a perfectly respectable ride. Let's see what MCN's verdict is. So the Himalayan rolls along with reassuring fuss-free solidity. Its bash plate and long front mudguard shield the motor and exhaust, and when things do get tricky, you can always dab a foot with ease. Clearly it's never going to win the Dakar, that's for sure, but the Himalayan feels built with a bit of the rough stuff in mind. The KTM, surprisingly, never stops feeling like a road bike. That is surprising, because let's face it, KTM know what they're doing with off-road bikes. However, there are tricks up the KTM's sleeves. It has a safety net of traction control, a smarter ABS system, and it's substantially lighter than the Enfield at a measured 173 kilograms with a full tank of fuel. So it's a very lightweight bike, as well as looking pretty good, particularly for a KTM. Certainly looks better than the Himalayan in my view. The verdict here, when judged as a road bike, KTM's new 390 wins hands down. I guess no surprise there. It might be a little more expensive than the Himalayan. Well, they say £1,100 difference. It may only seem a small amount, but when you consider the whole bike, the Himalayan is £5,000. That's a big percentage difference, 20% more expensive. The price difference, though, is completely justified when you compare the spec of the two bikes. But when it comes to which is the better adventure bike, that's when things get tougher. For the road, it's the KTM, but the real adventure is with the Royal Enfield. Is what their summary was. So yeah, interesting. As I say, I've ridden the Royal Enfield, haven't ridden the KTM 390 Adventure yet. Really looking forward to riding that. I love the Super Duke, the baby Super Duke, the 390. Sorry, not the Super Duke, the Duke 390. Really love that bike. I suspect this is more of an off-roady version of that. Can't wait to have a go at that. I love the fact that with these smaller bikes, you can absolutely rag them on the road and you don't end up doing ridiculous speeds. Love that. All right, that's it for the paper review for this month. Hope you enjoyed that. Always love to hear your comments below. I've got some notes here to myself. I just wanted to mention, don't forget to follow me on Instagram. That seems to be taking off. There are a couple of channels on Instagram. Mine's called Missenden Flyer, not the Missenden Flyer. That's a dead account, but it's actually Missenden Flyer. If you follow me on there, it'd be great. I put stuff on there quite regularly, and it's just a way of, if something goes wrong with YouTube, I'll be able to get in contact with you. And I'm trying to get myself to 10,000 followers on there. I'm 9,300-ish at the moment, so if you haven't done so already and you're on Instagram, it would be great to have you follow me there. And then one other thing I want to mention, this, at long last, the TMF neck buff, I'm following in the footsteps of my friend Itchy Boots here, Norley, is now a thing. This is on my website, so check out the missendenflyer.com. If you fancy yourself a bit of TMF merch that won't break the bank, I think these are £8, then the new neck buff just in time for the winter season. Sorry for reminding you about that being around the corner. All right, that's it for this time. Hope you enjoyed that. Look forward to speaking to you again soon. Until then, this has been the Missenden Flyer. Cheerio. Against Mr. Fly here, hope you're well, and welcome back to another bike news, this time for the month of June 2020. I've got 5 newspapers to go through here with all the latest. Do that again. Hey kids, it's Mr. Fly here, hope you're well, and welcome back to another bike news, the occasional series here on the Mr. Flyer. No, that's wrong, let's do it again. Hey kids, Mr. Fly here, hope you're well, and welcome back to another edition of Bike News, the monthly series here on the channel where I take the chance to look through the back copies of MCN and give you all the latest news of what's been going on here in the UK for this, in this case, the month of June 20... Oh, that's absolute rubbish. We'll go with the first one I had. All right, let's crack on. Okay, last paper for this month's review then. To the final paper of this month's review.